Oh yes, oh yes, oh yes, oh yes, oh yes, oh yes, oh yes. Hey guys, your friendly agronomist Tabs here. Welcome back. It is April, guys. April, the 4th month of the year. Do you understand how fast time is going? Let's get into it. Let's not waste time. Let's get into it. Hey guys, welcome back. My name is Tabs. I've changed the distance. You're further away now. I'm trying to keep you guys entertained. Just a friendly reminder. I've got a book out. I've got a book out on crop farming. It's designed for aspiring farmers. It's designed for farmers who are just starting out. It's designed for people who maybe never studied agriculture but are passionate about growing crops. It's called Nazoke, Basic Guide to Growing Crops. It's a 60-page, colorful, illustrated book with tables and charts and everything. There's even templates there if you don't know how to get started. It's given in a very easy-to-read manner, and man, I wrote it, so it's very easy to understand. And then it's also available online. I'll put the link in the description below. Let's get into today's episode. Today's episode is all about production. We have covered planning. Now we are in production. Production is linked with protection. But because protection is a bit long, if you combine it with production, what I'll do in this episode is I'll just talk to you about production. So let's get into that. When we talk about production, we are looking at how are you growing your crop. So there's usually two main areas you can grow your crop. You can either be outdoors or you can be indoors. Indoors, you can be in a tunnel, you can be in a shade house, you can be in a greenhouse. While outdoors, you're on the soil, or you're in the soil, in. So the main difference with these two different production systems is when you're indoors, you're looking to protect your crop as much as you can. When you're outdoors, your crop is can be affected by all the elements of weather. I'm here for the farmer who wants to use either of these systems. So the important thing about doing production on indoor system is making sure that you have the knowledge, the expertise to work with the equipment that you have or the type of system that you have. For example, if I'm going to be growing in a tunnel, I need to know how to pump the fertilizer throughout the tunnel, when to open the flaps to let the air in. Man, there's a whole lot of things. I'm just taking off the top. But you need to know what you're doing. It goes back to some of the points we discussed in planning. You need to know what you're doing if you're going to go into that production system. Obviously, growing outdoors in the soil, that's easier. So a lot of guys choose to do that. There, all you need to know is what's happening with the soil, what's happening with the weather. One is below, one is above. Once you get that right, it's just a matter of timing. When am I doing these things exactly? In my book, I go in depth talking about timing, so I won't go too deep into that. But what I will do is just to touch on a simple concept. So if I am going to be planting today and I'm trying to supply, let's say, the winter markets, we are getting into winter right now. So winter markets, I know that fresh produce will be high. For example, I know price of green pepper will be high. So I'll start planting not today. I would have planted maybe a month ago. So I obviously look at the weather. I'm not gonna plant because I'm trying to get the market, but the weather's against me. Because if I do that, then I'll lose seedlings, I'll lose seeds. So I try to time my planting, looking at when the market will be good, give me a good price. I time it with the earliest variety of green pepper that I can find, the one that doesn't need a lot of days to mature. I time it with the weather, as I've said, the weather pattern, and I've timed it with the market. Also in there, I'm timing my management practices on the farm. How quickly I'm giving fertilizer, all those things, weeding. I'm timing everything to make sure that when it's time for me to harvest, I'm harvesting X amount of quantity that goes to whichever market I've arranged to take it to at a set price. That's good for me. That gives me profits so that I can plow back into my business, and keep going like that. So a lot of our guys get caught up here if they weren't caught up in planning. When they get caught up here, it's a matter of planting whenever, whatever, and trying to see if you can sell, which is counterproductive, because the more there's uncertain steps in your production sequence, then that's where you lose money. If you've been following from the previous episode, you will realize that we've covered planning. And one of the last things we discussed in planning was doing a soil sample. We need to do a soil sample in order to know exactly what is happening nutrition-wise in our soil. Are the nutrients enough for the crop we are planning to plant? If not, what do we need to add? How much do we need to add? That's what a soil analysis report tells us. That comes from doing the soil sample. What we have as human beings is a diet that we eat, right? A diet comprised of all the foods we eat. And you remember that triangle. I don't think the triangle is the right thing, but the triangle with the fats on top and proteins and all those things. Plants also have specific nutrients that they need in order to grow and develop in a healthy manner. The most important ones are NPK. I'll put them somewhere. NPK is basically the most important nutrients that need to be present in the soil or present in the nutrient solution that the plant needs in order to grow 100%. Now, there are other nutrients that are required in, let's say, lesser quantities than NPK. These would be something like sulfur, calcium, magnesium, manganese, boron. But these are required in very small amounts, but still are required in order for the plant to have good growth and development. So the main consequence of not putting these type of nutrients into your crop is that your crop ends up having a low shelf life or a short shelf life. So basically, the nutrients that are there in your crop, in the soil, determine how long your crop will stay on the shelf after you've harvested it. It's to do with quality. If you're writing down notes somewhere, write this down in bold. Fertilizer improves quality of produce. If you do not have fertilizer in your produce, the quality of your crop will be less. That means if you do not put fertilizer into your crop will go rotten sooner rather than later after you've harvested it. I know the guys who want to grow organic are crying. There's nothing wrong with organic, but organic is not meant for capitalist markets. Let me put it like that. Organic production is good for other type of economic systems because you need a large amount of readily available organic fertilizer to go into the crops because it's easily leached. That means it easily gets evaporated out of the soil or goes down into the soil profile and therefore is not available for the plant. So you need a lot of that. And the amount of work and the hustling required to put it in all the time, it ends up maybe costing as much as fertilizer. Because now remember, labor that's money. You need to pay the laborer. Even if it's just you need to get paid. These are the things that you need to look at if you're going to do growing for the market or growing for yourself. Growing for yourself, organic, that's fine if it's just for yourself. But if you need a large quantity of produce at a set time, organic doesn't really work. Inorganic, synthetic, fertilizer that we buy from the store, that tends to work because we need it to be quick. So these are things we need to think of and come to terms with these things from the get-go so to avoid making any unnecessary losses during production. Moving on to an example of our soil analysis reports. It's in the book. I think it's very important that we touch on it here. So generally what you find when you've taken your soil sample to a lab, that whole sample that you put in, they'll take like about a teaspoon and do the various tests on it. When it comes back, it'll tell you how much acidity is in the soil and or how much lime you need to add to correct that acidity. It'll tell you how much NPK is in the soil. It will also tell you things like your zinc, your copper, your sulfates. It'll tell you those important nutrients from a snapshot. And then depending on your wallet, the lab might group different type of yield outlooks. So there could be a low yield outlook, a medium, and a high yield outlook. What this does for you, the farmer, is you might not have all the money required to go for the high yield with the high potassium and the high nitrogen, phosphorus, but you might have enough for the low. So it gives you the right amount of quantities for each of these stages so that you do not have to thumbsuck or guess how much fertilizer to put in and how much yield will I get. So it's sort of like a planning tool that helps you to anticipate how much produce you'll have so that you can anticipate the expenses and the costs that go into production. And you can also make sure that you do not overcommit yourself. You have enough in terms of savings that you're putting in so that when you get that profit or that income, it goes straight into the business. Not this thing of we take it out and it goes somewhere else, and when we come back for the next cycle, there's not enough. So we are trying to fight that bad cycle. So that's basically your soil analysis reports. Man, I know I'm rushing through it, but it's well explained in the book. I'm not gonna go too deep there. Then there is a very important section called sanitization. Sanitization is very important. Very important. It's basically saying that you should be keeping your farm clean. How do you keep your farm clean? Is by making sure that your workers, yourself included, when they enter the farm, they are clean. Whether they're wearing boots, if you're doing indoor production, there should be a foot bath where the guys come and, dip their feet in and wash their hands before entering and when leaving. So those are the type of considerations that we talk about. You talk about biosecurity, making sure that access is tightly controlled. If you're in a greenhouse, you cannot just have your doors open. It needs to be closed. If it's open, it's allowing in air. There's nets in there so that insects don't come in. It's not just a free-for-all. You need to think about these things, because if you don't think about these things, the insects will come in there. It will lay eggs. It will spread a horrible disease. And because you're in a tunnel, it'll spread like wildfire. So very important that you pay special attention to sanitization. There needs to be a roster of people who are in charge of sanitizing for that week. What was done? Has it been done? There needs to be proper management, because at the end of the day, when you are now looking for those special markets and all that, they will ask you, how have you been ensuring that your production is up to standard? When you go now looking for global GAP certification, they will ask you, how have you been ensuring all these things? So the sooner you get used to doing these things, the easier it is for you to do your best. I'll end this particular episode, fertilizer use. This is a pretty involved section. I wish I had like a little board, because there's a lot of calculations here. And to be honest, this is how people get left behind. This is how they waste money on fertilizer. This is how they apply too little fertilizer. This is how they get poor quality produce. This is how they don't make it into markets. This is how they get poor reputations when they do make it into markets. Fertilizer. So what I'll do is I'll probably put up this table. I've got a nice table that shows some of the different fertilizers that are there. So 2 bodies of thought as well here. There's the inorganic fertilizer, then there's the organic fertilizer. The organic fertilizer, that'll be your manure, chicken manure, cow manure, pig manure, whatever manure, as well as your grass clippings, your dried leaves, whatever. Organic means that it came from something living. Your kitchen scrappings, all those things, that's organic. Inorganic, that's what we go to the store, we buy, it comes out as pellets, it was made, it was mined, it was milled, you know, it was packaged. Inorganic. So some of the inorganic types you'll find is your different blends. You'll find things like 101, 234, 232, 515, things like that. Then you'll have your nitrogenous fertilizers, your LANs, your ureas. You might want to put in some P, some phosphorus, then you'll have your single superphosphate, SSP. You'll have your potassium chloride, potassium nitrate. So those are the different types of fertilizers. The main importance here is the concentration or the quantity of NPK that comes with each of these fertilizers. Now, after you've done your soil sample, you know exactly what's needed. Your fertilizer quantities tell you how much NPK or other elements you are putting in with that one bag. Then you are able to subtract from what your soil analysis report said you should put in. It's a bit of a juggling act. That's why you need an agronomist that makes it easy for you to stay on the money and you don't need to think about it or remember it yourself. So yeah, guys, that is fertilizer use. I tried my best to run through this, and there's so much more I could say, but I don't want to overload you guys. The next video will talk about the protection part of production. That'll be now talking about the chemicals. What chemicals should we be using? What do we need to look out for? Things like that. And then, of course, just to remind you again, I've got a book out. If any of this stuff, was hitting you inside, then please make sure to get yourself my book. It's called Nazoke, Basic Guide to Growing Crops. It is a toolkit for any farmer or aspiring farmer who wants to know exactly what they need to know about growing crops and crop farming. I've made it very easy for you guys. I haven't used big terms. I didn't even call it basic manual to crop production. I said basic guide to growing crops, so that anyone who's interested will go for it. I've spoken a lot, guys. The sun is out. I need to go see some crops, see some farmers. Take care, and you better get ready for winter.